All right, hey guys. Let's get back to talking about my homebrew world. Um, I left off on races, and I'm not done, but we are ready to go to the next group. Basically, all the previous ones were the playable races, if you will. So now I'm going to go into the non-playable races, which is not something I've thought about before. That's actually something I don't like. I don't like the idea of a non-playable race. Or at least I didn't before. Like during the time period in my life where I was developing most of my world setting, I didn't like the idea of a non-playable race. Um, I felt like if they were sentient and something that could level and do basically all the same things that everybody else did, then they should be a viable race. But interestingly enough, I didn't do that actually with the setting that I use for Rollmaster, which again still has no name. If after going through all the things, if someone has an idea for a name, let me know. But so what I want to talk about today is I want to cover, or at least on this video, is the greenskins. Greenskins, i.e., these are the orcs, goblins, and ogres. All three exist. They exist in the fairly stereotypical idea as far as relationship to each other. Um, Orcs being the mannish size, goblins being little short guys, and ogres being big guys. Not super big guys, just big guys, right? Like, so we're talking 6 to 8-ish, 9-ish feet, with a lot of mass. 6 to 7 feet is actually not a whole lot bigger than, say, the Fair Elf race. But Rolemaster Unified does the whole sizes thing, so this is something that I considered when doing stats for the races, when I started them from RMU instead of RM2, is that they actually have sizes. So an orc is size 5, which is the generic human, elf, etc. size. The dwarfs, by the way, are also size 5. Obviously, they're shorter, but they've got so much mass that they end up classifying as size 5. Halflings are size 4. So goblins are also size 4, orcs at size 5, and then ogres at size 6. Fair elves and the like are not size 6 because of mass. Hillmen tend to be very strong and good constitution, big boned and whatnot, but that's not that much more mass, right? When you've got hulking shoulders and hulking legs and hulking arms and a bowling ball for a head, and you're 6.5, 7 feet tall, 7 feet to 8 feet tall, that's when we've crossed into the next size. At least that's how I spitballed it. So that's what they are. They are all, of course, a greenish skin tone. They have lower technology levels. They don't tend towards technology like the other races do. In fact, this somewhat helps it when you encounter them in combat, because all of their weapons carry a -5 penalty because they just aren't as good. They're poor quality. In fact, they maybe should have -10 from both being less skillfully made and less refined materials. None of the races actually have really huge benefits towards any particular of the three magic realms. I think that's kind of due to, well, I mean, maybe they do. I mean, if you get a +3 and it's a realm thing, and it's realm something else, then the realm is a +6 stat. Not to mention your own stat, but just from the bonus of your race, it's gonna be +6. So. But they aren't particularly slanted. The orcs, if anything, would make slightly better clerics. The goblins would make slightly better mentalists. And I actually never statted the ogres. But I would probably maybe look at statting them towards empathy, which would make them better essence That's partially just to give them a well-roundedness between the three of them, and also because then you kind of get that ogre mage trope from like World of Warcraft and D&D and stuff like that, and you have that as an option without being severely penalized. Though there aren't a lot of magic users amongst them at all. They're all relatively short-lived. They probably have lifespans. They have lifespans more akin to the halflings. Say 80 years or so. I have to cover up a window over here. The movement is really distracting me. Here's where it gets interesting. As I've already kind of stated before in like one of the early setting assumptions or requirements video, these are kind of my my cannon fodder, my suckers. Not because I've personally valued them that way, but just to make it easy for gameplay. No one's evil in their own eyes, right? And push comes to shove, these guys aren't actually, they really aren't actually evil in any particular way. I also hate the idea of alignment, good evil alignment being associated with genetics. That's just stupid in my head. But well, it's kind of stupid. It's something I've never liked. It's not stupid. It's something I've never liked. When I was more narrow-minded and arrogant in my past, I would call it stupid, and I still kind of reflexively still say it's stupid. It's not stupid. It's something I don't like, and it goes back to world-building principles that I would probably just choose otherwise. But anyways, they aren't particularly evil. They were, started somewhere in the world just like every other race were. When they butted up against the other races, they fought for space, and they constantly lost. How do they still survive? Here's the fun little twist. There's a reason why their skin is green. They don't need the best land to survive. They need the best land to be super successful and thrive. Like if some kind of disease or war was to go through and decimate the dwarven and human and halfling and elven populations, and the greenskins could push more effectively into their territory, my gosh, who knows what they would become. That might be an interesting, possibly alternate future idea to run for the setting. But they photosynthesize. They photosynthesize, and they carry and eat, and they trash eat, and like basically their bodies are designed or created, right, by the forces that create physical forces in the world, to get substance easily from nearly everything, right? So even though they are pushed to the worst parts of the world, which is part of why all the other races haven't been able to really ever push them back further, is because the resources aren't great for them, but it doesn't bother the greenskins. So the greenskins can keep throwing numbers at them and keeps this, any kind of conflict of, what's the word? It's an A word where you're, I'm going up with abstinence. That's not what I mean. That's not the word I'm looking for. But the A word, right, where you're drawing the war out, the conflict out, and trying to run people out of resources, they'd win because they don't need as much. But that's why they can survive up there and still have such numbers as to still constantly be a border threat, both to the humans and the dwarves. Those are the people who mostly border them, as far as the major nations go. That's why. So that's an interesting thing, because that was one of the things that I wanted to do. Was like, well, why are they green? They could just be green just cause, but and I try to tie it all together, like, why are they still a threat, even though they're pushed out of some of the best spaces? Maybe because they can survive even though they have less resources. Oh, well, maybe they don't need as much ground or food because like plants and animals because they provide their own food. That's why they're green. That was kind of my thought process probably. I don't know. It was a super long time ago, right? So yeah, they photosynthesize. They don't have strong stats. They do have, let's see, the orcs have -2 in presence. So they would make particularly worse mentalists. The goblins also would make bad mentalists. Um, do, do, do. Well, the goblins still make the best cleric, or would better make clerics than anything. I also find that to be kind of fitting because their history would kind of push them towards an either happy to suffer nihilistic point of view or one that would be rooted in a lot of faith, right? Like people who constantly get pushed to the edge, they break one way or the other, I think. A people, not individual people, but sometimes individual people as well. Um, and obviously they have good stats for base hit points. They have good stats for strength, and they have good stats for constitution. The goblins are definitely really agile, whereas the orcs and the ogres are not really agile. So goblins make good rogues. Again, that doesn't mean that they're going to have to be rogues. It's just, they could also just be really agile fighters or really agile casters. Doesn't really matter. But that's them. They don't live alone, though. They live with the next group, which I'll get into in just a minute.